Welcome to Solved, because if we don't tell you how to think, someone dumber on the internet will. My name is Jay, and our other resident solvers are Amanda, Deon, and Erin, who will offer a greeting now.
Hey there.
Hello.
How's it going?
Collectively, we produce the venerable, indispensable, not to mention award-winning podcast Best of the Left, where humans, that's us, curate progressive media on a chosen topic, creating episodes that are greater than the sum of their parts. On this show, we use those same curation skills to pull together stories and ideas that help us solve some of society's biggest problems. Today, we're exploring the question of who is allowed to know what. Scientists, universities, and our public education system are under attack by a government that wants to control what's studied and dictate to educators what they're allowed to teach. At the same time, the government is looking to implement vast changes to the way it handles the personal information of every single person in the country. Why? So they can know more about us. So we're starting off with this article, Trump administration attacks on science trigger backlash from researchers. This is written by Dan Vergano for Scientific American. And right up front, it gives a nice little summary of the battering ram they're taking to intellectual pursuits in the country. It says, quote, "In its first 2 months, the Trump administration has targeted the U.S. research enterprise in numerous ways, including cuts to funding for the National Institutes of Health, firings at agencies such as the Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Health and Human Services, and the National Science Foundation, and threats to university funding over equal employment and diversity offices. President Trump derided hormone health studies as, quote, making mice transgender in a March speech to Congress, and his administration has banned words connected to climate science and racial equality at federal agencies at labs." And one scientist quoted in the article says, "Think about it. We can't talk about reality. We can't talk about what is actually happening in the real world that affects all of us."
I feel like every time we have these conversations, it kind of borders that conspiracy theory level. Like, it feels like we're almost living in that dystopian future that we've all read about and now are seeing the actuality. Like, I could see someone kind of pushing back a little bit because it feels unreal. Yet, these are verified sources. It is happening in plain view. It is very apparent. And yeah, I guess that makes it pretty scary.
I thought of Alex Jones when we were reading this, and I'm glad you went that direction because I think the lasting damage of having a figure like Alex Jones be a national figure in America is taking the idea of some horrible thing that is happening with the government and making it all seem like a conspiracy and seem out of bounds. So when we're talking about this kind of stuff that is happening, that is reported on factually, it does sound kooky. It sounds crazy. Like the government's being taken over. They're trying to alter reality. Or are they also trying to turn the frogs gay? It is kind of crazy making that we are witnessing a slow moving, sometimes pretty fast moving coup. Like this is a takeover. Democracy is being killed and a dictatorship is being installed. And part of that dictatorship is changing who gets to describe what reality is and the bounds of saying what reality is. And that's as scary as it can be. Yeah. Well, textbook's right. And textbook is scary.
Yeah. I forgot that it's also scary. I thought it was just, I was like, well, they're following the checklist. So that, that all checks out to me. Oh, right. It's also horrifying.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you said that though, like textbook, you can read about this and it is sterile and it happened to some other people far away, but it is happening to us. It is something that will probably be in textbooks at some point, but we're dealing with it. So we've got this weird connection to it. Like, well, it couldn't possibly happen here. I've heard that said a couple times, and maybe some people wrote some books about it, but here we are.
It's obviously worse than it's ever been. I'm not trying to say it's the same as this, but I cannot help in a couple of these conversations we've had lately think back to the Bush administration the doublespeak that was happening under the Bush administration, it was like the first time we've really witnessed that level of a propaganda machine. And they did remove words from government sites. Like that stuff started happening then. And now it's just like, okay, shift into overdrive. We're doing it without any sort of wink and nod and trying to make it seem palatable. Like they don't care about that anymore. So we're just full on stripping away science for ridiculous reasons. And we're not going to give you some palatable answer for what's happening.
So, Deon, you reminded me by bringing up the book "It Can't Happen Here," and any others that talked along those lines, that it turns out the lesson we learned about science fiction, where science fiction writers are constantly afraid that they're going to describe a dystopia that some tech bro is going to take as an instruction manual. I read "It Can't Happen Here" back in 2017, probably, and I was like, oh, wow, he completely nailed it, like exactly described. And so either he's a genius for having predicted it, or that got used as a roadmap, as like a
Yeah.
manual for taking over the country. So, yeah, we're going back in history again today. We've been doing that a lot recently. It seems revelatory sometimes, but for context, a British commentator once made an observation about the US that has stuck with me for years, and I don't know who said it, and I can't quote it exactly, but paraphrasing, they said about the US, a feeling of exceptionalism doesn't create a drive for improvement. It fosters a sense of lazy entitlement.
That's a good one.
And obviously, he was referring to the concept of American exceptionalism that we all know and love today. But that idea, thank you for laughing to clarify for the listeners.
That's what I'm here for.
But that idea came back to me when reading this next article by Jeet here for The Nation. Trump's academic purge will make America stupid and provincial again. And it turns out, based on this article, that there's plenty of context for our current spate of anti-intellectualism. The writer starts back in Thomas Jefferson's time and says, quote, Jefferson dreamed of a new nation that was not only independent, but also enlightened. Toward that end, he created in 1825 the University of Virginia with the goal of bringing the best minds of Europe over to nurture the fledgling youth of the new republic, who would be given free space in a university of adolescent liberty to pursue the life of the mind, which all sounds good so far. And the new university went on to recruit faculty from the US and Europe to mold these young American minds. And since the concept of American exceptionalism wasn't fully entrenched in the country yet, one would imagine that these young people would be hungry to better themselves in the cause of helping to build their young nation. However, the article goes on, quote, the students at the University of Virginia tended to be, like Jefferson himself, plantation gentry, with the hauteur intrinsic to the slave-owning class. They had little appetite for mental exertion, preferring to gamble and brawl rather than learn Latin or algebra. Suffused with a good old boy ethos, they prized manly belligerence and regarded the studious with contempt. These strapping young men would have their slaves carry their books, which they themselves rarely deigned to open. They would regularly challenge each other and their professors to duels. They rioted with the chant, down with the European professors, end quote. And then just one quick story about one of those European professors. It says, in 1841, the brilliant mathematician James Joseph Sylvester, only 27 years old, but already writing papers whose conceptual brilliance astonished the field, was hired by the University of Virginia, end quote. Now, ultimately, he was run out of the country for being Jewish and ended up doing most of his teaching in England. And I made this point on Best of the Left, available wherever you get your podcasts, in our episode about the attacks on universities and those that have caved to the pressure, that racism always ends up hurting the racists in ways they don't understand. By resisting integration, the racists deprived not only Black people, but also themselves to public swimming pools. By wanting to stop Black people from receiving government benefits, the racists deprived themselves of a robust public health system. And xenophobia from Jefferson's time to today has deprived the country of smart and talented people who would have liked to come here and help make this country better and smarter. But provincialism, racism, xenophobia drove them away.
When reading these articles, I'm thinking about the tariff war, whatever is going on with the tariffs. By the time anyone sees this, who knows what will be happening. But a very little mentioned point in regard to one of the many, many reasons given for the tariffs, that they're going to try to bring jobs back, bring factories back, is just the assumption that if we bring factories back here, everybody will just start buying our products from here. As if China hasn't been making these things, isn't very good at it, and has been doing it at a level that the rest of the world kind of seems to enjoy. But the idea here, like, we just start building factories and boom, voila, we're the best. That's not based in anything other than this idea of exceptionalism. Like, why would we be better at doing these things that we haven't really been doing in this country? No one really gets better at anything by not doing it. And why would we be better at making any of the parts, products that are made in China that we don't make here just because we started doing it? That's just racism and this sense of white supremacy. Like, we'll just be better. Why? They have no idea. That's why this idea that they have to change history and make sure you can't say anything about Black history or anybody that's not a white man, that's rooted in this white supremacy, that this challenges the idea that other people can be good at things. So instead of competing, we'll just change reality and we don't have to compete. But that's not how this is going to work with the tariff war or whatever it is. China will still make these products, and they'll still make them very well and cheaper than we possibly ever could.
This story about the University of Virginia's early beginnings, I mean, they don't tell you that story at Monticello. They don't bother to get into that part of the early beginnings. And it's a really interesting story because it goes on to describe the meeting they had to have where a tearful Jefferson is like begging these idiots to get their shit together and stop being awful. And that's quite a founding story and so emblematic of our culture. And I think that's what was kind of stunning about it, is because you want to believe that the people back then were much more high-minded and because they didn't have just the distractions we do today. And it's the same because the class difference there is I am privileged and can do whatever the fuck I want, and then everyone else. And so that remains the same. Nothing about that has changed. And the pseudo-intellectual angle of it, where everyone thinks because they're wealthy or, part of a plantation owner family, that they are like almost above the idea of education. Like, that is also something that is still really, really part of our culture now. And it was unnerving to read that because it does kind of, as I said, like shatter some of the image you have of people from a couple hundred years ago. But it's also very helpful in understanding where we are.
It doesn't shatter my perception because I view them all as savages, but I digress there.
I mean, sure.
I expect no less. I think what Amanda was pointing to is the narrative, like how things get addressed now. It might be surprising, but I've always kind of thought that there's a class difference in how education is approached, right? Because for a lot of lower class people, education is a gateway. Like, it is an opportunity. It's something that they need in order to achieve a better life for themselves. If you're rich, what does going to school offer you? Like, you don't necessarily need that education. You're already in a place of privilege. And honestly, you already have the benefit of being intelligent because maybe you have parents who are educated. They use bigger words with you. Like, you have certain advantages that you're offered because of your station in life. of course it comes with the privilege. And I do feel like that's very indicative. Like, I like that we're taking it back to the beginning of the United States, at the beginning of education, because that mindset has just persisted.
Because of the show we do, The Best of the Left, that again, available where you find any of your fine podcast, I have gotten to listen to a lot of these, like Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, the Mark Andreessen types talk. And in their own words, the way they describe things, they describe education as like it's some evil. And it makes sense now in this context that they think education is bad because it is a gateway. It does give people opportunities to climb, and they don't feel like those people deserve it. It should be people like Elon Musk, who the mythology is he's just a super smart special boy and he should just be in charge. He didn't have to go through school. He's just so good. We should let them do stuff. And Peter Thiel, who was a very smart person, probably actually smarter than Elon, did go to these schools, but now he badmouths them as if they're a bad thing because, again, he just wants the mythology that I didn't need that. It actually held me back. I am special. I should be in charge because I'm special, not because of the education. And that's why they demonize experts, but they lionize, mythologize, lift yourself up by your bootstraps kind of stories of these people. And that's leaving out all kinds of context. And education is good. We should maybe listen to some experts. Elon is not an expert in everything, even though that's what we're being sold daily. He knows best. Let him work.
And this is why Thiel gives, quote unquote scholarships, although it's to literally have that person leave college.
Yep.
That's the culmination of that philosophy, if you want to call it that.
I've
Yeah.
also seen a lot of that circle kind of talk about what's going on in education as like a revolution. Like, they're kind of changing things and it's for the good, and like we're going to be way better off when these changes happen. Of course, the Department of Education is like holding us back. I follow someone on social media and she was making commentary on a different issue, but was talking about the difference between authoritarianism and revolution, which I thought is beneficial here. If it was truly an educational reform, you would see all kinds of experts. You would see teachers, you would see administrators, you would see all of these people coming together to truly redefine education in America. Like, you would see them leading the charge. That's what a revolution would look like. Authoritarianism is people without the knowledge, without the expertise, just making blanket statements that change, our entire future, our kids' entire future. Like, this is being told to you. And if you're constantly having to reiterate who the enemy is, what the problem is, it's probably not actually the problem. You're doing a heavy load of convincing people that DEI is the problem in our education, and not funding, and not the attempts to privatize.
And this article goes on to explain the instances that have created cracks in this racist, xenophobic shell that the American education system sort of inhabited for a very long time. And it's war.
Yeah.
When the country goes to war, we suddenly wake up and think, oh shit, do we need smart people here? Oh, okay. All right. What do we do? Yeah. Okay. Yes. Einstein can come in. Other refugee scholars can come because, it turns out we need some smart people and we don't fucking have any because we don't prioritize that until our back is against the wall. So it says it was only the threat of losing the Second World War and the Cold War that America's WASP elite was willing to loosen its habitual hidebound insularity. And Cold War, I guess, could be shorthand for the space race. But think about, we realized we needed talent and we immediately were like, we don't know how to build rockets. Bring in all the Nazis. Nazis know how to build rockets.
Yep.
Bring me those Nazis. And that's how we, quote unquote, won the space race, because we didn't have the talent here to do it. And that's the only time when we decide, okay, people from outside the country, I guess, are okay, when we realize in a short period of time, oh, we're being threatened. But if we're not being threatened directly, then we're like, oh, come on, education, get out of here. Who needs that? We're already exceptional. Let's just Netflix and chill.
Just so, in case you're watching the show and you think what Jay said was an exaggeration or maybe kind of conspiratorial about bringing the Nazis in, Project Paperclip. It's real. Look it up. That's a real thing. We had a real program of bringing Nazis into America after World War II and putting them in a lot of pretty high positions.
I mean, they also put them on Disney.
Werner Herzog, yeah.
No,
Von
Von
Braun.
Braun. Yeah, not Herzog, the documentarian.
Yeah. Werner Herzog would probably be against it.
Yeah. But Von Braun was like not just a Nazi who came in, but like the face of the space program in the United States. That's pretty stunning at that time, like just after the war.
Well, he was white, so he looked good on television.
Yes,
we could handle that. That was okay.
I mean, it speaks to the attitude at the time that there wasn't more outrage, or I mean, I'm sure there were people speaking up, as there always are, but the fact that it, like, Disney, really?
Yeah, he was doing those fun explainers about science.
I mean,
but
Disney,
God forbid your kid see any gayness or any hint that someone might be in a same-sex relationship or like are non-gender conforming, like God forbid, but Nazis.
Well, no, I mean, what that said was we are more aligned with the values of white supremacy than we are with anything else. I mean, like, that's why that was okay. That's why they did that, because it didn't feel that crazy, even though looking back, it seems very crazy.
I mean, okay, you're going to force me to do it. I didn't know we were going to have to go down the rabbit hole this far. The Nazis got their ideas from us.
Yeah.
Jim Crow inspired their race laws. So I don't know if that has a fancy name like Project Paperclip, but it's documented.
No, we're historically extremely cozy with all of those ideas.
If you don't know that, definitely check out the Best of Left podcast, because we have quite a few episodes specifically about.
So just to wrap up this article, it ends with kind of what we need to hear, right? Like, what would a full-throated defense of international students sound like? And they don't mince words. They simply say, a full-throated defense of international students on liberal terms would run like this. Immigrant scholars have made America a much better country. This has been true from the time of James Joseph Sylvester to that of Albert Einstein to that of Mahmoud Khalil. The current Republican embrace of xenophobic anti-intellectualism is bad for America. It will make the country stupider and more provincial.
Yep.
So, I mean, this is the point I made on Best of Left. It's just like, even if you're a rabid America first, pro-America, we have to be the best kind of a person, you're doing it wrong. This is not how you make the country great. So much of the benefits that this country has enjoyed has been from to what degree we have been open to immigrants coming to this country. They have contributed enormously. Think if the country had just been left up to those slave owners who went to the University of Virginia and challenged their professors to duels, how much more backward would we have been?
It's almost like white supremacy and misogyny are stupid.
Almost.
Yeah, almost.
If you think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you think
But
about
don't think about it. That's the key to making them work.
That's right. That's right.
All right. So Yuval Noah Harari has written the book Nexus, like from the future. We were just discussing before we started recording that he seems to have written this book from the future, but he published it over a year ago to precisely describe the moment we are living through. And he's describing how societies choose to manage their information broadly, right? And so he says that, quote, totalitarian regimes choose to use modern information technology to centralize the flow of information and to stifle truth in order to maintain order. As a consequence, they may have to struggle with the danger of ossification, which basically just means due to there being more information than is easily manageable, they really struggle with being able to use that information efficiently or make decisions or, if needed, to change course. So they tend to remain kind of stuck with whatever they've thought before, and it's hard to incorporate new information to make new decisions. But Harari continues and says, on the other hand, quote, democratic regimes choose to use modern information technology to distribute the flow of information between more institutions and individuals and encourage the free pursuit of truth. They consequently have to struggle with the danger of fracturing, end quote. So a free society where institutions spread out can have sort of a network effect of how they manage information, can handle a much larger flow of information, but you can have fracturing if everything's not flowing through one central propaganda unit. Then people might have different ideas and they follow different paths and then fight with each other about it. So that should sound familiar to any American. So it's been argued that last century's conflicts between these two styles, democracy and totalitarianism, was kind of decided along these lines. He says, quote, totalitarianism didn't work because trying to concentrate and process all the data in one central hub was extremely inefficient, end quote. So now we are generating way more data than ever, which feels like it should continue to favor a distributed information management system based on the free exchange of ideas. However, we have also built data management systems far beyond the wildest dreams of dictators of the last century, giving new hope, Harari points out, to those who would centralize all information for the sake of power. Now, with that in mind, let's move to our next article, How Musk and Trump Are Working to Consolidate Government Data About You. This is written by Emily Badger and Shira Frankel of the New York Times. And they say, quote, the federal government knows your mother's maiden name and your bank account number, the student debt you hold, your disability status, the company that employs you and the wages you earn there, and that's just a start. These intimate details about the personal lives of people who live in the United States are held in disconnected data systems across the federal government, some at the Treasury, some at the Social Security Administration, and some at the Department of Education, among other agencies. The Trump administration is now trying to connect the dots of that disparate information. Last month, President Trump signed an executive order calling for the consolidation of these segregated records, raising the prospect of creating a kind of trove about Americans that the government has never had before, and that members of the president's own party have historically opposed. Now, obviously, Elon Musk says that combining all this data will help the government sniff out fraud because that's the only sentence he's able to utter these days. And in response, Representative Jamie Raskin says, quote, they have not demonstrated a single case in which fraud detection has required some universal governmental access to everybody's data. In fact, the creation of a monster uniform database of all information on all citizens will be an invitation to fraud and political retaliation against the people. And he goes on saying that this is how personal data is tracked and used in authoritarian states. Both Russia and China stockpile data on their citizens to track opponents and squash dissent of the ruling party in government. Again, it's not a conspiracy theory. They say they're doing it. They just claim it's to detect fraud. In the last episode, I had to say a lot of times, even if you take them at their word for what they're intending to do, you have to also recognize what they are creating, even if only incidentally. Say you have the utmost trust in Trump and Musk, which makes me think you need medical help, But let's say that you trust them. No one should want all personal information for citizens or anyone living in the United States to all be consolidated into one trove of data, because when a government you don't trust comes into power, they will have access to it and can misuse it. Now, for me, that happens to be the government that's in power right now, but no one should want this ever for all time.
Yep. And it seems like this is something people could come together on. It really does. It's the same in terms of, I have this, it's probably naive thought that we can come together on ensuring everyone gets due process, because the alternative is dangerous and bad for everyone. And so the same in this case. And we do have privacy laws in this country. I mean, we critique the fact that they're not strong enough and they're not enough and they're not detailed enough, and that's fine, but they actually do exist. And the tax privacy laws are actually quite stringent, because we've realized that is important as a society over the years. The IRS signed a memorandum with Doge and DHS and Treasury to say that Doge can have access to the tax records of immigrants. And they're seeking like 7 million people's tax records, right? And I have a lot of questions about how they got to this MOU that was signed. I certainly do. But there's a lot of redacted content. And, within that redacted content, it gets into the details of what is allowed to be shared and how. But of course, we can't read what can be shared and how, because it's all redacted. And so in response, a group of senators sent a letter to the IRS. And in that letter, they state, as you know, violations of the tax privacy rules are punishable by civil and criminal penalties, including up to 5 years in prison. And they cite that in the MOU, I guess it's the Treasury Secretary in this case, saying, yeah, we're going to follow all the rules, but we do have authority to do this under this one section of the tax privacy code. And I couldn't help myself. I went and read it myself, and you can too. It's section 6103 if you're interested. And it's not complicated. It's not a jargony section. It just says this information can only be used for preparation for actual legal proceedings if you're a member of DOJ or ICE or one of those organizations. And in the MOU, Bessent, the Secretary of Treasury, says that this is how they're going to use it. Like, we're going to follow the law. The problem is that it is for preparation for actual legal proceedings. But since they are completely avoiding due process and just kidnapping people off the street with no arraignments or hearings or trials, there are no proceedings. There are no grand jury proceedings or otherwise. So it's a very safe bet that they are just going to take that information and never have the, quote, proceedings that are the supposed linchpin for their legal access, quote unquote, legal access of this information. They'll just detain people indefinitely, giving the private prisons millions to hold them of your taxpayer dollars, or deport them before a judge can intervene. And so under that guise, what do you think they will do to US citizens they don't like? They'll drum up sham investigations and access their data. And I say all of this because I think it's hard to imagine what they can do with your information. It's hard to creatively come up with what the evildoers will do. That's just one example. There are plenty of others.
I'm with you, Amanda. I keep wondering what the issue is going to be that will bring more people into the light, if you will. I keep thinking, oh, surely this is it. So, I mean, with the example you just gave and the IRS and other agencies combining all that information for the government, for a party that is afraid of big government, this feels like the straw, right? This feels like the thing that is going to convince them that, oh shit, maybe I put my faith in someone who I shouldn't have. Maybe everything that I was afraid of was a possibility, but it doesn't look how I thought it would look. But I mean, you have like Elon Musk a couple weeks ago, doing his rounds, bragging about all the savings and all the scams that they found in Social Security in these different agencies. And one of the people's questions is like, "Oh, so like when can we expect a Doge check?" And like he was
Yeah.
completely bewildered that a citizen would ask for a tax return, like money back, if there's all this fraud that they're providing. You know what I
All
mean?
this
Like
savings. Who's
So-
gonna get the
so-
check?
yeah, and like with big money, I know statistically that was one of those issues that Republicans and Democrats agreed on, like by and large. But yet we're under a regime where the richest man in the world is right there with access to all your information that's running the government. Like all of these conspiracy theories that have circulated, it feels like we're seeing them play out, that the government actually is overreaching, that they are out of control. And yet I'm seeing a little bit of the like people who voted because they thought he would reduce prices. But as far as that core base, just from what I've seen thus far, it's not looking like they're splintering. And that is concerning.
Mm-hmm.
All of this talk about due process reminds me of, y'all are familiar with internet laws that get named after people. Just like a smart thing that gets said and then it gets attached to someone. So I came across a brand new one. I'd never heard of this before, but just this morning I came across Wilhoit's law, which states conservatism consists of exactly one proposition, to wit, there must be in-groups whom the law protects but does not bind, alongside out-groups whom the law binds but does not protect.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought back a little bit through history and thought, holy shit, that's really good. That is on point.
Yep. Absolutely.
But there's all this talk of efficiency, like that came up several times in this, and that's the discussion, like you're trying to find fraud and waste, and like the government is inefficient and we need to cut it down. And I immediately thought like, well, this is why we need humanities and arts being pushed forward, because these STEM field type people, efficiency seems to be the goal, the endpoint. Like that's what all of this is for. It's just efficiency. And no one in any of these groups seems to be like, but why? Because I can think of a few things that are pretty efficient. McDonald's is extremely efficient.
Mm-hmm.
It's very efficient at producing shitty food, but it's efficient. Is it good that their workers are paid nothing? Is it good that they're getting rid of workers and replacing them with robots? Is that good? Walmart, super efficient. Walmart is one of the most efficient companies in America. They have, like, I live not too far from their headquarters, and they've got companies coming there to be in their supply chain. It's all in one little compact universe at this point. It's efficient, but does it help with the community? Does it make communities better? It's terrible at that. Like all the little squares and the shops in your downtown that are gone because of Walmart, they were inefficient, but they also served a purpose of bringing people together and making people know each other. You don't do that at Walmart. Like Elon's little pro-natalist fetish that's been coming out about him having a bunch of children. I'm sure he's having.
I think the Onion describes them as random offspring.
Yeah. Well, random off, like he is efficiently producing a bunch of children. Being a parent isn't efficient.
Mm-hmm.
Having a relationship with someone isn't efficient. Having sex isn't efficient. Like
it can be.
It can be.
Sterilize it.
Is that the goal?
Right.
Do you want to have efficient sex to procreate at X amount of time? Like this idea that efficiency in and of itself is a good is, I don't know, sounded like what the Nazis thought.
Yep.
The Holocaust was pretty fucking efficient.
Yep.
And that scares me. This idea of efficiency is now being applied to deporting people. We don't have time to put all these people on trial. How long would that take? It should take as long as it needs to.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a perfect setup for the next segment, because it turns out this whole question about the use of personal information within the government is not a new debate at all. And under the subhead Privacy over Efficiency, the article continues, Congress debated that question 50 years ago as it considered passing a law to protect the privacy of Americans' data in the wake of the Watergate scandal and with the growing computerization of personal records. Then Barry Goldwater, the Republican presidential nominee back in the 60s, who was so obviously opposed to this, like, where does it stop? Why would we allow the government to collect every bit of information about us, put it all in one database so that one person with one click of a button could know everything about us? So, amazingly, the American Congress did the right thing. And it says, with the passage of the 1974 Privacy Act, Americans chose privacy over efficiency. We made a very conscious choice to say we're accepting the costs of inefficiency, because if a unified database came into the hands of someone who wanted to put state power to some repressive purpose, their task would be made too easy by that centralization. So, there's a very good argument for why we shouldn't be trying to consolidate these kinds of data sets at all. But beyond that, there are bigger technical problems that are going to result in real world harm when they try to do this consolidation with a chainsaw rather than a scalpel. So many of these data sets were built totally independently, as we just heard described, and they even use different technical definitions of words like family and income. And it's going to make sense within a certain data set, but not between data sets. So when you start trying to combine, it's going to create massive errors that are going to compound over time. So the warning in the article is as serious as, like, people's benefits could be wrongly cut because of some database error, all the way up to people could be wrongly deported for essentially the same problem.
Which we've seen. Thank you, Deon, for going to some of my favorite analysis of government and how it operates is that efficiency marker of just like, should it be efficient or are there other things to prioritize? So I love that point. The point I'm going to make is efficient for who?
Yep.
Because a lot of these efficiencies that they're talking about, like Jay just saying, like the data, it isn't more efficient unless your goal is to combine a bunch of information about people so that you can use it for whatever ends you're looking to. I mean, like, it is efficient for someone, but it's not by and large the American people. I'd also say that about like most businesses. When they use the word efficient, I hear cost effective. I don't hear true efficiency. If we actually wanted to make things efficient, like, let's tackle healthcare. Like, I think everybody would agree healthcare can be more efficient. There's so much administrative stuff that goes on that makes it incredibly hard to navigate. So if we're actually looking for efficiency and things in our system to move better, that would be a great place to start. But that's not what they're doing. Like, this is not about efficiency whatsoever. It's about greenlighting things that make my buddies rich, cutting the red tape that makes it hard for them to get rich, and prioritizing things that will, I don't know, favor people in my realm, because like most of who they're catering to has to do with who's in that circle. Yeah, so definitely not efficient for American people. And we probably need to keep reiterating that.
Yeah, I mean, this is propaganda. Waste, fraud, and abuse, that's just another tagline for propaganda purposes. They need to give people who support them something to say, right? While they totally destroy the government. So, like, that's what they gave them. It's 3 words, really simple. You can run around the internet with it. And that's what they're doing. I mean, it's pretty sad, actually. But to go back to what Jay was saying about why the Privacy Act came to be, this article kind of glossed over it a little bit, said like after Watergate, this happened. Well, just to like really emphasize, there were 2 prongs to this. One was, yes, computers were starting to be used in the government and as part of government systems. So that was concerning to people about, the privacy of their data. But what came out during Watergate was that Nixon was doing insane privacy breaches, insane abuses of power. He was using the CIA, ordering the CIA to conduct illegal domestic surveillance and investigating private individuals, primarily activists, anti-war activists, civil rights activists. He was trying to use the government as a weapon against its citizens. That is why people started to get a little like, I don't know, maybe we should set up some parameters here. This is getting a little uncomfortable. And Johnson did it too, just more narrowly, but like, this is what was going on. And this is why Congress responded with the Privacy Act. And so the Privacy Act keeps information protected within each agency. And yes, they don't talk to each other by design. It is not a mistake or a, oops, we just did it bad. Like it was done on purpose. This is for a reason. And we don't talk about this stuff enough. We just get complacent and, oh, we have these laws and it happened 50 years ago, so I don't need to remember why we have this law. And then we start having these conversations, which is crazy. And like, again, this is where the left and the right really could come together on something. Like the government should not be able to use the information it has on you simply by way of living in this country and engaging with government services for any other purpose than to serve you and maybe bill you if you owe taxes. That's it. That's the agreement we all made by living here in this republic. And you also have the right under the Privacy Act to request all the data that the government has on you. Again, because Nixon abused his power and was collecting like files and folders on people, right? Like that's why. So it's kind of the flip side of FOIA, which is the Freedom of Information Act. Or journalists or anyone can request information from the government. You, as a citizen, can request the information the government has on you personally. That is part of the Privacy Act. And Jamie Raskin, who was mentioned earlier, has been really like bringing this forward and is encouraging people to submit requests to DOJ to find out what DOJ has on them, because it is, first of all, it's your right and it's protected under the law. And then you can find out what the hell did they pull. I mean, if they respond, which is always a question, but legally they are supposed to. And so I'll put that link in the notes that Jamie Raskin has a website where, you can learn about this and like find out how to do it if anyone's interested. So, Elon crying about how this is all inefficient is more let's do government like a business kind of bullshit. Like that's the cover for it all, of course. And let's look at that for a minute, because companies, we all engage with many, many companies in our lives. They all have tons of information on us and they get hacked regularly and all our information gets stolen. And then we go through this whole process of lawsuits and trying to recover any sort of fraud that may have happened and abuse. And like, it's because they have all our information, and depending on what kind of company it is, some like pretty detailed, important information all in one place, right? And so it says in the article, Google doesn't control the apparatus of immigration enforcement. Target doesn't have the power to halt Social Security payments. And that's important because the government is not a business and it should not be run that way. And a business does not have the power to literally upend your livelihood at a whim, right? There is a difference there. And beyond the abuse that this administration is absolutely eyeing, because let's remember that Trump's mentor, Roy Cohn, was Joseph McCarthy's chief counsel. That is really important to remember. This is the guy who taught him everything. Joseph McCarthy's chief counsel. But beyond all that, there is also, and the article says this, a huge threat of hacking from bad actors and adversarial nations. And it has happened in 2015. And I was personally affected by this, actually, because I was a government contractor for a while. China hacked the Office of Personnel Management, OPM. And it was a huge deal, like 22 million people's very personal information, the fingerprints of spies, like that level of stuff, because OPM handles security clearances for the government, every level of them. All of that was stolen by some entity that was connected to the Chinese government. So to me, this really seems like something we could get together on. I find it fascinating that there's anyone who doesn't agree with this, because libertarians and conservatives have been banging this drum forever. And longer ago, left-wing people were banging this drum. Not as much these days, but certainly were, because they were remembering the activists targeted in the 60s and 70s. Why can't we just agree on this?
But what if a dead person gets a Social Security check?
Worth it. That's what I say.
I want us on the podcast to be on the record that I don't care if a Democrat gets elected after Trump. I do not want this power in the government, period.
Right.
And like, once you do it, I imagine it's pretty hard to undo it.
Yep.
And what we've seen in a lot of administrations is, even when Democrats are against something, when they get back in power, they don't necessarily make moves to disassemble what was created. So
We
that is
prefer to
one
look forward, not backward, Erin.
Oh, God.
So I'm just going to say that is one of my concerns, that like, yes, it's awful that it's happening now, but the fact that I don't know what the endpoint would look like or how to undo that unless you have a very strong push from the electorate. Like, it is, unfortunately, I think, going to take a lot of people pushing back on this before anything gets movement.
Right after the election, there's a lot of asks about Democrats, like, what do Democrats believe? What do we need to do? And I can't remember which Democrat it was, but I do remember what they said, which we need to lead with our values. We need to lead with our values. Not ever saying what the values are. And I think this whole conversation we need to assess, what are our values? Like as a country, as a people, what is the purpose of any of this? I think that is the difference right now, that Elon and Peter Thiel and Trump to a certain extent, but they do have values and goals, and they have a reason for this. And like Erin said earlier, who's this efficiency benefit? Well, it benefits the rich. Like, that's what all of this is in service of, is more efficiently.
I should have known it was going to be the rich.
Yeah. It's there. And when you take that Scooby-Doo mask off, it is always a rich dude. Like, every single time.
The mayor.
What is the purpose of any of this? Like, our economy over the last 5 decades, it's gotten a lot more efficient. Productivity is shot through the roof, and it has been completely disconnected with making anybody's life better except for a very small sliver of the population. Is that what this is all for? Is that what we're doing any of this for? Is it just efficiency so that we can make rich people more money? Is that the goal of life? Because it seems like the further we go down this path, that seems to be the only reason any of this exists. It's not to make people's lives more comfortable. It's not to give people more free time. Like, an efficient workforce would be, we only work 20 hours a week, and you get to not do as much the rest of the time. But that's not the goal in any of this. The goal of all of this is, like, we all work more. We all spend more time at work, grinding efficiently to do what? Like, what's the purpose of all this? And I think there's a disconnect that
Get
we
to
have
Mars, I think.
for a few people to dig in mines on Mars to produce more ore, to do more building of what? Like,
Right.
I think there is a moment that we as a society need to say, did we win the game? Can we stop playing the game and maybe just start enjoying life? Like, it's always the next, we're building towards something and building and building and building. But for what? Like,
Infinite growth.
And the only thing that grows like that is cancer, and
Yep.
it doesn't grow infinitely. It just eventually grows
Kills
until it kills us. And I think that's what we're in. We're in a cycle of nothing.
I think what you missed, Deon, from our childhood when the film Independence Day came out, that the aliens are actually the good guys if you look at it from the right angle. And that's what we should aspire to be.
If you really look at it.
Seriously, that does appear to be the lesson that some people got out of it. Like, they're just going to new planets and efficiently destroying them one by one until they can destroy them all.
So is one of our solutions that science fiction writers need to fucking stop.
That maybe.
Tone it down.
Just stop
Good Lord.
writing. You're giving them ideas.
Yeah.
Because of the Amanda principle, which we have not defined maybe on YouTube, but succinctly, it is that both sides of the political spectrum can look at one thing, whether it be a quote or art or a book or whatever, and interpret it as upholding their own ideology, despite all the evidence to the contrary. And so it looks like science fiction really fit right into that sweet spot where all of Silicon Valley and the tech bros were like, excellent path forward. Like, here's what we need to do, and took the wrong side. I just want to say real quick, Dan, you were asking what for. I think it's so that more billionaires can go up in space for 5 minutes.
Also celebrities.
Yeah.
Celebrities, but they're all very, very wealthy.
Yeah. I hope they're all fireworks at some point.
You guys are missing the
Ooh.
obvious answer.
Yikes,
Like,
that was dark.
Yes.
we are a Christian nation. Like, all of this is in service. Like, suffer now, afterlife. Come on. Like, we'll get there eventually, and that's when you rest. That's when you have socialism. That's when you have all the things that you were promised. Like, you just have to wait till you die.
Right.
So,
Okay.
Cool.
Tell me more, Erin. We've gotten quite philosophical. I do want to make it worse for people before we solve this issue for everybody. You might be scared about your own personal information and privacy and what the government might do with it, but it can get worse. So that brings us to our last article. It's time to worry about Doge's AI plans. This is by Nathan E. Sanders for The Atlantic. And so beyond AI chatbots, which was part of a previous article that we skipped past, they also want AI civil servants. So they're not just laying people off to have fewer employees and then just get less done. They're like, no, we can just replace those people with AI chatbot civil servants who don't just respond to queries that humans give them, but the AI civil servants will make actual decisions as well. So the article says, quote, the more AI decision-making is integrated into the government, the easier change will be. If human workers are widely replaced with AI, executives will have unilateral authority to instantaneously alter the behavior of the government, profoundly raising the stakes for transitions of power in democracy. Trump's unprecedented purge of the civil service might be the last time a president needs to replace the human beings in government in order to dictate its new functions. Future leaders may do so at the press of a button.
I don't want to enter into conspiratorial territory here, but what is not conspiratorial, which is very, very real, is that Elon Musk is trying to insert his companies into every single aspect of the government, from NOAA satellites to everything NASA does to, I can't remember the full list, but there's at least like 5
Starlink
or 6
being-
things, Starlink being part of everything. So their next project is these robots, and they're supposedly supposed to be for our personal use in our homes, but there's a very high likelihood that he has other ideas and designs for this, and the government just seems to be his cash cow. So anything his companies do, he's going to try to create a contract in the government for his companies and just milk it. And like, one of the members of Congress whose profile is raised recently, I can't remember her name, she's like, this sounds like a scam. And it is. It is a scam. That's totally what's happening. We are being fleeced. Whether it is, an application in a computer or a robot or a satellite, we're being fleeced. He has recognized that this is an easy source of revenue for his companies, and he's well on his way to becoming the first freaking trillionaire, which apparently is a goal for someone who has a deep, deep, dark hole in his heart. And sure, yeah, don't have any humans work in government, just like we barely have any humans working in companies anymore. And it's infuriating. So let's just do that and make people rage against the government even more. It's hard to quite see how all these pieces fit together because their vision of what the world should be is so anti-human, like literally and philosophically, that it's really, as people who are pro-human, it is very hard to imagine the kind of evil, twisted shit that they want. But here we are.
I mean, this is what happens in a capitalist, like, you have to be a certain personality type in order to extract so much and think that you have
Yep.
the right to do so.
The little
I mean,
schemers.
the little schemers.
Call back.
And I think when we're reading about a lot of history and we're seeing things that are aligned, like a lot of the attacks are very similar. The one area that I have thought is vastly different is the technology. And like that adds a layer to it that's scarier. I mean, they can do things a little bit faster. They can do things more aggressively. There's just more information about every single human out there today than there was, 50 years ago. So, I mean, we are in a different landscape. And I mean, like, Amanda, your whole thing was like, what? We overturned Citizens United, and then there was an actual rich person who decided they were going to buy our government and implement every single one of their companies into it. What? Like,
Who could have
who
seen
would
that
have
coming?
seen that
Never
coming?
could have seen it coming. Exactly. I mean,
And
we've just been building the stairs for them for a
Yeah.
long time.
And then we're sitting here with our mouths open like, oh my gosh, they actually did it. Like, yeah, no shit. When there aren't guardrails, like someone's bound to go off it. Yeah.
I don't think
That's-
we don't have our mouths open, to be clear.
No, we do not. When I say people, I mean other than ones who literally study the news
Right.
for work.
Well, ironically, the foundation of this country, the guidebook is the Constitution, written by people who owned other human beings and didn't see them as fully human, who couldn't possibly think that that could be extended to just a guy like Elon who didn't see anybody as humans. This philosophy that everybody else is NPCs, he's the main character, or the idea that this is all simulation and his consciousness is the only one that matters. That's why it's so easy to not think of any of us as anything but numbers and data to be plumbed and farmed.
Yep.
And I think it was talked about in kind of joking terms many, many times throughout the media. It's like this idea that Elon doesn't play his own games. I think it's actually pretty instructive about who he is as a person. He has a bunch of other people that he doesn't see as people, basically bots that play his game and build up his character, and then he gets to use it without having gone through any of the things that make a game worth playing. That's why people play. They don't play games to get to the end point where now you have this built up character. That's not healthy, rational behavior. The reason games exist is to play, to get better yourself, to either compete with someone or have
Or
some
God
sort of
forbid,
social,
have fun.
have social interaction, have a good. That's what it's a game, but that's not the way he views any of this. It is to be the best, and it doesn't matter that he didn't actually do it because he'll just take credit for it at the end. And it's the same thing with his companies. It's the same thing with just everything. Everything is just a means to an ends to make him the best, and he's not. He won't. He can't be. There is no end point that he will be satisfied. And we're being led by two people with different versions of this exact psychopathy, for lack of a better word. And if we as a society don't realize that none of this is for just the gain of a few people, it's just the idea of a society is that the people within it are doing better because we all work together in different ways. And that is being completely upended. And the idea of a society is that we are all workers for a few people. Do we want that? And I think that's the thing Amanda's saying. We could all agree to that. But the ability for us to get people to see that that's what's happening, oh boy, I don't know if we're anywhere near that.
I had multiple thoughts. I was about to solve all of our problems here at the end, as we always do, but then I just went on this roller coaster where I almost interjected Deon to point out that the real purpose of video games is to build social cachet, which I was going to be joking about because I was like, that's only a thing that started happening because people started playing video games on the internet. And then I thought back to old school video game leaderboards
Mhm.
that
Oh,
people
yeah.
would dump
Yeah.
their entire allowance into games so that they could put their name at the top of the list. So maybe that is what video games are for. Or that's always been an option anyway.
No.
Can I make one more point? Because jumping off what Deon was saying, like, these people are malignant narcissists. And like, I don't even feel bad diagnosing because because it's so obvious.
It's
Like,
just
it's
true.
not, I don't need a degree in psychology to understand that, right?
Mhm.
And I think what's interesting is it seems like culturally we kind of think, well, you have to be a malignant narcissist to be the CEO or to be the like extractor that someone like Elon is, right? And exploiter. And what it actually is that we have set up a system and a structure so that those are the only people who can succeed.
Yeah.
Because if you're a good person and you want to do good things with a business or you like care about people, it is harder for you to succeed on that level. I mean, I can't even think of an example of somebody who
No,
really has.
the board of
Like,
directors would replace you
right,
if you
exactly, because you're not
try to
ruthless
bring
enough.
morality into
Right.
the corporation.
Absolutely.
You're not cutthroat enough. So like we have designed this, like, and I say we, I mean collectively, globally, even, although the United States has had a huge hand in it, setting up a structure that only terrible people rise to the top. And I think we need to think about that more and think about why it is that we are dealing with these monsters. It's not just we were unlucky. We did not enforce and regulate and care enough about creating a system that didn't elevate people like this. So here we are.
And the worst part is I've been hearing this talking point, especially on the right, and like we're talking internet, right? Of like people being envious of Elon Musk. And I like thought about this for a really long time and thinking about like what is there to envy that Elon Musk has? People are not envious of the lonely man who is trolling and like has weird ideas. Like that is not what they're envying. They're envying the comfort of having enough money that you don't have to worry where it's coming from, that you know you're going to be taken care of, that you know if we hit a recession, your family's going to make it through. They don't envy a man who is going around making broken homes, because that's what you're doing. When you're having a bunch of babies with other people and you're not actually a part of the home, you're just making broken homes. I don't care how much money you have. But you yourself and what you've created is not of envy. It is just us wanting to live a life where we don't have to constantly stress about money.
Are you all ready for the solution?
Absolutely.
Yes. Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
good.
Eat the rich?
So luckily, I kept reading Nexus after Yuval Noah Harari laid out all of the warnings, and he actually has some ideas. And it's sort of like Isaac Asimov's rules for AI. And so he has 3 principles for managing democracy and information at the same time. So the first principle, he says, is benevolence. Quote, when a computer network collects information on me, that information should be used to help me rather than manipulate me. This principle has already been successfully enshrined by numerous traditional bureaucratic systems, such as healthcare. And he goes on to describe, like, think how doctor-patient confidentiality allows patients to be maximally honest with their doctor for the sake of their health without the fear that their honesty about their personal health conditions could then be used to manipulate or coerce them. So that's a perfect example of extremely delicate personal information that is protected so that you can get what you need out of the system. So that's one good example. The second one, just a quick reminder, Harari published this book like a year before Trump's reelection or any of the news about Doge. And he says, quote, the second principle that would protect democracy against the rise of totalitarian surveillance regimes is decentralization. A democratic society should never allow all its information to be concentrated in one place, no matter whether that hub is the government or a private corporation. It may be extremely helpful to create a national medical database that collects information on citizens in order to provide them with better healthcare services, prevent epidemics, and develop new medicines. But it would be a very dangerous idea to merge this database with the databases of the police, the banks, or the insurance companies. Doing so might make the work of doctors, bankers, insurers, and police officers more efficient, but such hyper efficiency can easily pave the way for totalitarianism. For the survival of democracy, some inefficiency is a feature, not a bug.
So I should throw away the necklace I have with all my passwords, and it's written like I have all my passwords in this one book on my necklace.
It's not good to have everything in one place.
Super efficient. It's right there.
Not ideal, Deon.
Okay.
And the final principle I'm sharing, he actually has more in the book, but he says a third democratic principle is mutuality. If democracies increase surveillance of individuals, they must simultaneously increase surveillance of governments and corporations too. It's not necessarily bad if tax collectors or welfare agencies gather more information about us. It can help make taxation and welfare systems not just more efficient, but fairer as well. What's bad is if all the information flows one way from the bottom up.
Yep.
So did we do it?
We need our Doge checks. Like, you're taking all this money.
Oh, that's what Erin learned from all.
Yeah. Like, information has to flow both ways. Like, right? Like,
yeah. All of that, I obviously agree with everything you just said, but like, we have laws because we kind of agreed as society that we weren't going to do it the bad way. The problem now is whether or not those laws are going to be upheld, and whether or not the courts have enough power to keep the administration in check. And that's the terrifying situation we're in right now with everything.
I will just point out, this is sort of a side note from our primary conversation today, but woven throughout the principles that Harari was just describing, he also brings in surveillance capitalism and what private companies are doing. And so his idea is not just about how the government should manage your data, but how we should have laws on the books that dictate how corporations manage your data, and that if data is being collected to profit from you by manipulating you, which is the fundamental basis of surveillance capitalism, then that shouldn't be allowed. And the government should be able to step in and say, look, like, you're allowed to have people's data. It just has to be used to help them rather than manipulate them for the sake of profit. So if you can't do that, if you can't follow that basic rule, then maybe you should change your business model and start charging people for your services instead of having everything be quote unquote free, where you're paying with your data, with your personal information. So it's all integrated together.
Yeah. And on that point, no, we don't have enough laws to protect people. And Europe seems to be the only one concerned about this. And everything that we have that even mildly protects us is kind of a benefit downstream from the GDPR bill that the European Union passed. And we need a lot more. So
there we go. I'll wrap it up in 2 sentences. Let public knowledge be free. Keep private information siloed for the protection of all. That's my takeaway.
Perfect.
And show up on May 1st for the May Day protests.
Excellent. I'm glad we solved it. I'm always a little worried. And then we get to the end and we knock it out of the park. If you have any thoughts beyond how we've already solved all of these problems, maybe thoughts on implementation or convincing the government to follow through, please let us know. You can leave us a voicemail or send us a text to 202-999-3991. You can send an email to j@bestofleft.com, or you can find us on Signal at bestofleft.01. Thanks for listening, and remember that this is all really happening. As dystopian as it feels, it is real, so continue to be decent, act like what you do and say matters, and do what matters most. Today, we're exploring the question of who is allowed to know what? Scientists, universities, and our public education system are under attack by a government that wants to control what's studied and dictate to educators what they're allowed to teach. At the same time, the government is looking to implement vast changes to the way it handles the personal information of every single person in the country. Why? So they can know more about us.
They say knowledge is power, but it cuts both ways. It can light up the world or bring on darker days. When information is in the hands of the few, what's real can be twisted, what's false can seem true. It's a fight for the future, a battle for the mind. Those who control information will shape what we'll find. Who owns the facts? Who guards the past? Who shapes our stories and decides what will last? Education can free us, but data can bind. Exposed to reprisals, fear controls the mind. They say it's for justice to keep systems fair, but they're building a weapon with the info they share. When all of our data is theirs to command, it's a tool of repression in the wrong hands. Knowledge should teach us, the past should be clear. They're collecting our secrets to trade on our fear. Who owns the facts? Who guards the past? Who shapes our stories and decides what will last? Education can free us, but data can bind. Vulnerable to reprisals, fear controls the mind. In a totalitarian state, they centralize control, stockpiling data to tighten their hold. But democracies thrive when knowledge is spread, a tapestry woven, not one single thread. Data should serve us, not tighten the chain. Used with consent, not for profit or gain. Keep it decentralized, let no single hand steer. Embrace inefficiency so there's nothing to fear. Who owns the facts? Who guards the past? Who shapes our stories and decides what will last? Education can free us, but data can bind. When privacy is honored, we can find